Hey guys, tonight we are stepping barefoot onto the worn planks of a Polynesian outrigger canoe, just as twilight spills soft gold and violet over the horizon. The salt in the air clings to your lips, the ocean hums a low lullaby, and you've somehow agreed to a voyage across thousands of miles of open water with no map, no GPS, and barely a clue what you're doing. Spoiler, you probably won't survive this on your own, but lucky for you, you've got some of the most skilled navigators in human history as your guides. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And while you're at it, drop your location and local time in the comments. I love knowing where in the world you're drifting off from tonight. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. The canoe beneath your feet is narrow but stable, crafted from hollowed logs and lashed together with coconut fiber rope. It's surprisingly light, yet strong enough to face the Pacific's moods. You stand near the mast, clutching a rough-hewn paddle, as seasoned sailors, barefoot and sun-worn, move with calm precision, adjusting sails made from woven pandanus leaves. This is not just a boat. It's a living memory of generations who have crossed these same waters, trusting in skills honed long before written maps existed. The ocean stretches out in every direction, no land in sight. The idea of venturing into this immensity feels absurdly reckless to your modern brain. Where's the safety net? The GPS pinging reassuringly in your pocket? But here, long before satellites, Polynesian navigators charted courses over thousands of miles, connecting scattered islands across the Pacific. Fact: they reached Hawaii, New Zealand, and Easter Island centuries before Europeans entered this ocean. And they did it repeatedly, not just by chance, but with a science of the senses that's as fascinating as it is hard to imagine. One navigator, the Tautai, kneels at the stern, whispering to the sea as if it can talk back. A quirky tidbit you overhear: some old stories say the ocean is like a sleeping animal. You don't command it, you learn its moods, coax it, keep it calm. That mindset feels a lot more comforting than giant, unpredictable abyss, which is what you're picturing right now. As the sail fills and the canoe slices forward, the air thickens with the smell of salt and sun-warmed wood. Waves slap gently against the hull, a rhythm you'll come to notice is not random. It's already carrying information, telling you where you are relative to distant islands you can't yet see. Historians still argue whether early Polynesian expansion was mostly deliberate or partially accidental drifting, but watching this crew, you're inclined to believe there was nothing accidental about it. One sailor gives you a grin and points back toward the disappearing shoreline. "Last time you'll see that for a while," he jokes, before tying another knot one-handed without looking. You realize this is their world, the boat, the wind, the sea. A floating family, a floating laboratory of navigation, history, and survival. As the stars begin to prick the indigo sky, the canoe steadies into its course. You settle against the side, hearing the wood creak and the water hiss past. Somewhere inside you feel both small and strangely safe, knowing that tonight you're beginning to glimpse a system of knowledge that turned the vast Pacific into a home. And for now, you let the swells cradle you as twilight deepens, the first step in understanding how these voyagers read the ocean like a map. The sun has sunk fully below the horizon now, leaving a dusky afterglow that paints the waves a deep blue gray, like brushed steel rolling endlessly toward nothing. The canoe rocks gently, a reminder that you're no longer tied to solid ground. Here, navigation isn't about paper maps or blinking screens. It's about surrendering to senses you didn't know you had. You crouch low near the navigator, a wiry elder with eyes narrowed toward the dim horizon. His name isn't given freely. You're just told to call him Tupa, which feels more like a title than a name. He motions for you to place your hand on the smooth, salt-slicked side of the hull. "Feel it," he says softly. At first, all you notice is the boat moving up and down, but as you keep your hand steady, you detect something subtler, a long, rolling swell, rising from one direction, then a shorter, choppier rhythm from another. This is how Polynesian navigators read the ocean's pulse. Fact: vast ocean swells can travel thousands of miles unaffected by surface winds. Skilled wayfinders memorize the feel of multiple overlapping wave patterns. One set might come from a distant storm over an unseen island chain, another from prevailing trade winds. Like reading a heartbeat, these undulations tell you not just where you are, but what lies far beyond the horizon. A quirky tidbit the crew chuckles about. Veteran sailors sometimes describe the sea as grumpy or lazy, depending on the swell. "A lazy sea takes you home," Tupa murmurs. "A grumpy one? That's when you keep your offerings to the spirits handy, just in case." You're not sure whether he's joking, but judging by his perfectly serious expression, you decide not to ask. You shift your weight and notice how the canoe itself becomes part of the compass. The twin hulls amplify each wave pattern differently. Tupa kneels, barefoot, pressing lightly on the lashings, feeling the energy beneath. It's like he's plugged into a signal you can't hear, translating vibrations into direction. Polynesian navigators are said to have chartless charts, an invisible map stored entirely in their bodies. They know when they've drifted off course because the rhythm under the canoe feels wrong, like a skipped beat in a song you know by heart. Historians still argue whether this skill came purely from trial and error over centuries, or whether it originated as a refined system passed down deliberately. Some scholars suggest that early voyages must have been partly accidental, storms blowing people off islands, lucky finds. But the precision you're witnessing now doesn't feel like luck. It feels like the product of thousands of years of keen observation, memorization, and training that borders on superhuman patience. The sea grows quieter under the stars, a glassy smoothness spreading between swells. Tupa signals with his chin for you to close your eyes. "Learn like the old way," he whispers. You do, reluctantly, and suddenly you notice how much information isn't visual at all. The canoe pitches slightly left, then rocks back, and your own body feels the push and pull like a message in Morse code. It's overwhelming at first, but slowly you start to separate one swell from another, like picking out different instruments in a song. "You'll forget by morning," Tupa says with a small laugh, "but one day you'd know this ocean as well as you know your own house. The image makes you grin sleepily. Right now, your house is a rocking platform on endless water with no walls, no ceiling, and absolutely no plumbing. A part of you wonders how many modern adventurers would even last 2 days out here without radio or radar. Probably not you, given that you nearly dropped your only water gourd an hour ago. Still, there's something oddly comforting about this ancient knowledge. It feels alive, taught hand to hand, wave to wave, not scribbled in a book. As you lie back on the woven matting, you start to notice patterns without trying. Long swells pushing from starboard, a faint cross-chop nudging the bow. It's like the ocean is speaking a language you're just beginning to hear, one soft syllable at a time. By the time you drift close to sleep, the horizon has vanished into darkness. The canoe sails on, guided not by what anyone sees, but by what they feel beneath their bare feet and weathered hands. The ocean's pulse keeps steady time, an ancient heartbeat, pulling you ever deeper into this floating classroom, where the map isn't drawn, it's touched. The sun has sunk fully below the horizon now, leaving a dusky afterglow that paints the waves a deep blue-gray, like brushed steel rolling endlessly toward nothing. The canoe rocks gently, a reminder that you're no longer tied to solid ground. Here, navigation isn't about paper maps or blinking screens. It's about surrendering to senses you didn't know you had. You crouch low near the navigator, a wiry elder with eyes narrowed toward the dim horizon. His name isn't given freely. You're just told to call him Tupa, which feels more like a title than a name. He motions for you to place your hand on the smooth, salt-slicked side of the hull. "Feel it," he says softly. At first, all you notice is the boat moving up and down, but as you keep your hand steady, you detect something subtler. A long, rolling swell rising from one direction, then a shorter, choppier rhythm from another. This is how Polynesian navigators read the ocean's pulse. Fact, vast ocean swells can travel thousands of miles unaffected by surface winds. Skilled wayfinders memorize the feel of multiple overlapping wave patterns. One set might come from a distant storm over an unseen island chain, another from prevailing trade winds. Like reading a heartbeat, these undulations tell you not just where you are, but what lies far beyond the horizon. A quirky tidbit the crew chuckles about. Veteran sailors sometimes describe the sea as grumpy or lazy, depending on the swell. "A lazy sea takes you home," Tupa murmurs. "A grumpy one? That's when you keep your offerings to the spirits handy, just in case." You're not sure whether he's joking, but judging by his perfectly serious expression, you decide not to ask. You shift your weight and notice how the canoe itself becomes part of the compass. The twin hulls amplify each wave pattern differently. Tupa kneels, barefoot, pressing lightly on the lashings, feeling the energy beneath. It's like he's plugged into a signal you can't hear, translating vibrations into direction. Polynesian navigators are said to have chartless charts, an invisible map stored entirely in their bodies. They know when they've drifted off course because the rhythm under the canoe feels wrong, like a skipped beat in a song you know by heart. Historians still argue whether this skill came purely from trial and error over centuries, or whether it originated as a refined system passed down deliberately. Some scholars suggest that early voyages must have been partly accidental, storms blowing people off islands, lucky finds. But the precision you're witnessing now doesn't feel like luck. It feels like the product of thousands of years of keen observation, memorization, and training that borders on superhuman patience. The sea grows quieter under the stars, a glassy smoothness spreading between swells. Tupa signals with his chin for you to close your eyes. "Learn like the old way," he whispers. You do, reluctantly, and suddenly you notice how much information isn't visual at all. The canoe pitches slightly left, then rocks back, and your own body feels the push and pull, like a message in Morse code. It's overwhelming at first, but slowly you start to separate one swell from another, like picking out different instruments in a song. "You'll forget by morning," Tupa says with a small laugh. "But one day, you'd know this ocean as well as you know your own house." The image makes you grin sleepily. Right now, your house is a rocking platform on endless water, with no walls, no ceiling, and absolutely no plumbing. A part of you wonders how many modern adventurers would even last 2 days out here without radio or radar. Probably not you, given that you nearly dropped your only water gourd an hour ago. Still, there's something oddly comforting about this ancient knowledge. It feels alive, taught hand to hand, wave to wave, not scribbled in a book. As you lie back on the woven matting, you start to notice patterns without trying. Long swells pushing from starboard, a faint cross-chop nudging the bow. It's like the ocean is speaking a language you're just beginning to hear, one soft syllable at a time. By the time you drift close to sleep, the horizon has vanished into darkness. The canoe sails on, guided not by what anyone sees, but by what they feel beneath their bare feet and weathered hands. The ocean's pulse keeps steady time, an ancient heartbeat pulling you ever deeper into this floating classroom, where the map isn't drawn, it's touched. The stars are awake long before you, sharp and countless above the swaying canoe, more than you've ever seen on land. Out here, without city glow or clouded horizons, the night sky is a cathedral of light. You blink at it, trying to make sense of the overwhelming spread, while Tupa, the navigator, sits cross-legged at the stern, eyes fixed on a patch of sky like he's reading a familiar street sign. You shuffle closer, curiosity outweighing your fear of tumbling overboard. "The ocean has a pulse," Tupa murmured last night, and now he adds, "The sky has lines." You look again, squinting. Lines? It's just stars scattered everywhere. But slowly, with his whispered guidance, the chaos turns into order. Fact: Polynesian navigators mapped out star lines, imaginary highways drawn from the rising and setting points of specific stars. These lines run across the horizon like a giant compass rose, allowing wayfinders to sail accurately for hundreds, even thousands of miles. Tupa points to a bright star lifting itself above the inky black horizon. "That one," he says, "leads you east." He gestures toward another slipping toward the opposite edge of the sea. "That takes you home." And then, pointing to a cluster glittering overhead, he adds, "Those only appear in summer. They tell you what season you sail in." The sky isn't just orientation. It's clock, calendar, and roadmap all in one. A quirky tidbit he shares with a sideways grin. Some navigators remember these stellar highways as stories of wandering animals. The Southern Cross isn't just a shape, it's the beak of a frigate bird pointing toward land. The Belt of Orion, a fisherman's net sweeping fish across the night sky. These mnemonic tricks make it easier to recall dozens, even hundreds of directional cues while the mind is half asleep from endless nights at sea. Historians still argue whether these techniques were first developed in Western Polynesia and spread outward, or if different island groups invented their own methods independently. Watching Tupa trace constellations with a steady finger, you get the sense that this knowledge grew organically wherever people dared to leave sight of land. Maybe it was a shared invention born of necessity, refined with every voyage, until the sky became as familiar as a village footpath. You're invited to lie flat on the deck to see what Tupa sees. The canoe rocks gently, and the stars shift in their slow, grand arc. With the horizon so flat and uninterrupted, you can sense the turning of the earth beneath you, a dizzying thought you push away before your stomach rebels. Tupa tells you to note where certain stars rise and set. He speaks in rhythm, like a chant. When this star comes up here, sail this way. When it dives there, change course. It feels like poetry, not instruction, which might explain how this oral tradition lasted so long without being written down. As the hours pass, the sky grows richer. You glimpse star paths crossing one another like invisible intersections. Some are used only briefly before dawn, others dominate all night. It's a choreography of light, and you marvel that anyone could keep it straight. You learn, Tupa says with a shrug, as if it's no harder than remembering a few street names. Meanwhile, you still can't point to your own house on a star chart without Google Maps. There's a moment of quiet awe when you realize the canoe doesn't just move under the stars move over you. Each shift, each rising point, becomes a breadcrumb trail leading you forward. If clouds roll in, the team doesn't panic, they simply lean on the swell patterns you learned about last night. The sea and sky are two halves of the same map, overlapping and reinforcing one another. Finally, Tupa nudges you gently and points to a faint glow low on the horizon, not from land, but from the rising Milky Way. That's the backbone of night, he says softly. Follow it long enough, you'll reach a place you didn't know you were looking for. The idea settles over you like a warm blanket. You watch the star lines guiding you onward, their paths steady and sure, while the ocean beneath murmurs its deep, ancient rhythm. As your eyelids grow heavy, you think about modern travelers clutching boarding passes, following neon arrows through airports, never truly knowing where the earth and sky meet. Here, direction is woven from starlight, memory, and faith in generations of watchful eyes. And as you drift toward sleep, the canoe gliding silently on a black mirror sea, you feel as if you're floating not just across water, but along the oldest map humans ever made. The morning dawns pale and soft, the kind of light that turns the horizon to brushed silver before the sun decides to rise properly. The canoe hums forward under a steady breeze, and you rub your eyes, surprised to find you've slept without interruption. You wake just in time to see Tupa squinting toward a cloud, nodding to himself like it's telling him a secret. You glance out in every direction. The sea looks like an infinite pancake, unbroken except for tiny crests of waves. You see no land. You see no birds, just cloud shapes drifting lazily across the endless blue. And yet Tupa insists he knows where islands are long before they're visible. Fact: Polynesian navigators relied on distant cloud patterns as one of their most reliable daytime signs of land. He gestures toward a puffy tower of white in the far distance. "Island there," he says simply. You follow his finger, but see nothing but sky. The explanation comes slowly in his low, patient voice. Certain types of clouds, especially the bright white cumulus clouds, form only over land because rising warm air and moisture swirl up from island surfaces. Over the open ocean, clouds tend to be flatter, more stretched out. This particular cloud has a vertical build, rounded like a scoop of ice cream, an island beacon invisible to everyone but the trained. You wonder if you'd ever notice something like that without someone pointing it out. Probably not. You're still trying to figure out which way is east without Tupa's help. He points to another clue, the shadow under the cloud. From this distance, it's only the faintest greenish blur reflected on the underside of the cloud's white belly. Quirky tidbit. Navigators say the ocean itself paints the clouds with its color, and when shallow lagoons or sandy beaches reflect upward, they stain the clouds green or yellow. You squint until you think you see it too, but maybe it's your imagination filling in the blanks. Tupa grins knowingly. Every apprentice sees phantom islands before they see real ones. Historians still argue whether this skill was widespread across all Polynesian islands or unique to certain wayfinding schools. Some accounts describe legendary navigators who could name every cloud formation and its meaning. Others suggest only a few masters possessed this almost magical sensitivity to sky signals. Standing here now, you lean toward believing the legends. You're invited to try it yourself. Tupa hands you a piece of pandanus fiber rope and points to 3 different clouds. 1 is land, 2 are nothing, he says. You line up the rope against the horizon, making crude sight lines like a modern tourist. After a minute of staring, you feel ridiculous. They all look like harmless puffs of whipped cream. Finally, you guess. You're wrong, of course. The crew laughs gently, no ridicule, just amusement. Takes 10 years, one of them says, or never. You shrug, accepting that never might be your time frame. A sudden, sharp glint on the water catches your eye, like a mirror flash. You point it out, thinking maybe it's a distant sail. Tupa just shakes his head. Mirage. Sky tricks you. The ocean and atmosphere make illusions all the time. Bent light, heat shimmer, false promises of land. The art of navigation here isn't about spotting obvious signs, but learning which signs are real, which are lies, and which belong to the moods of the sea. The sun finally climbs higher, turning the world blindingly bright. Clouds drift and change, but Tupa keeps track effortlessly, adjusting the canoe's heading by the smallest degree. He mutters directions under his breath, part chant, part mental note. It feels like listening to someone fold invisible maps, tucking each cloud and hint of color into memory. By midday, a thin, dark smear appears on the far horizon, the actual island, still many hours away, but now visible to untrained eyes. You look back at Tupa, astonished. He'd known long before you could see anything. The thought sends a little shiver through you, a reminder that this entire voyage is a dance of subtlety, one you barely understand. You settle on the deck, watching new clouds form and dissolve, wondering how many secret signals you miss every minute. The sky suddenly feels like a giant message board, filled with notes you can't read. But the navigators can, and that's why you'll make it safely through this ocean where most people would drift hopelessly lost. The afternoon rolls into a molten gold sunset, warm and heavy as honey, the canoe rocking gently on a forgiving sea. Your eyelids are heavy, but Tupa nudges you awake before you drift off entirely. He points upward, not at stars this time, but toward the faint shapes circling in the sky. "Time to meet our other guides," he says with a lopsided grin. You squint into the fading light and see a few seabirds looping high overhead. At first, it seems unremarkable. Birds fly everywhere, don't they? But here, hundreds of miles from the nearest visible land, birds are rarely just passing through. Fact, Polynesian navigators learned to read bird flight as a living compass. Different species fly out to sea only certain distances from their nesting islands, returning in predictable patterns at dawn or dusk. Some travel in straight lines toward land as evening falls, acting like feathered signposts for weary sailors. Tupa gestures toward one, a slim black and white bird flapping steadily toward the west. "Naughty turn," he explains. "Won't sleep on water. Follows it, you find home." You lean back amazed that such a small creature can lead you across this vast emptiness. It feels absurdly poetic, like asking the neighborhood pigeons for directions and trusting them with your life. A quirky tidbit one of the younger crew members shares with a laugh. Navigators sometimes imitate seabird calls during voyages, not to summon birds magically, but to encourage others to notice them. It's part joke, part teaching method. You imagine Tupa standing on deck, cawing at the sky, and the image makes you snicker until he gives you a mock stern glare. Bird signs aren't the only clues drifting past. As you peer over the side of the canoe, you notice flickers of silver darting below the surface, schools of fish moving like spilled mercury in the dark water. Experienced voyagers know which fish appear far out at sea and which hug reefs near islands. Flying fish are the wanderers of the open ocean, while reef fish signal that land can't be far. Tupa points out a streak of yellow and blue below, murmuring the name of a fish species you promptly forget. Still, you note how the crew perks up, steadily shifting course. Historians still argue about how much of this animal map was hard data, species ranges, migration patterns, and how much was oral legend folded into myth. Some anthropologists believe that navigators' knowledge of birds and fish was more advanced than modern science gave them credit for. Others think memory blurred fact and story over generations. Watching this crew work, you don't see a blur. You see living, breathing expertise tuned to signs you barely notice. The sun sinks lower, and the sky deepens into cobalt, the first stars twinkling awake. Flocks of birds appear briefly on the horizon, moving like purposeful arrows toward unseen roosts. Each bird becomes a tiny courier of hope. Follow them, and you follow life itself. Life that can't survive too far from the safety of land. The canoe glides silently in their wake, sails trimmed to match their heading. At one point, a lone bird circles above you 3 times before darting toward the south. Tupa tilts his head thoughtfully. "Freshwater island," he says. "She's thirsty." The idea that one bird's evening commute could tell you about a hidden freshwater spring somewhere far away feels like magic, but here it's just another data point in a map with no paper, no ink, only feathers and instinct. You imagine yourself lost on this endless ocean alone, craning your neck for birds you couldn't name, fish you couldn't identify, praying they'd lead you home. The absurdity makes you laugh softly, and one of the crew claps your shoulder knowingly. "Good you have us," he says. a little teasing, a little reassuring. As night folds around the canoe once again, the birds vanish toward their roosts, and the ocean grows quieter except for its steady breath. You curl up on the woven deck, hearing soft ripples under the hull, and picturing invisible lines of flight cutting across the twilight sky. The wayfinders don't need binoculars or compasses. They just watch the living world around them, a guidebook written in wings and scales, ancient and ever reliable for those who know how to read it. Dawn creeps over the water like spilled milk, blurring sea and sky until you're not sure where one ends and the other begins. The canoe glides forward under a light breeze, its woven sail taut and whispering. You're sitting cross-legged now, trying to shake off sleep while the navigator traces circles in the salt-dusted deck with his finger. Today, you're introduced to what Tupa calls the real map. Not clouds, not stars, not birds, but a chart etched into memory. The ATAC system. Fact: Polynesian navigators often memorized entire voyages as a series of reference islands, many of which might be invisible or even hundreds of miles away. The canoe doesn't move across the ocean, Tupa explains. The islands move past you in your mind. He places a few pebbles in a row to demonstrate, shifting them one by one while the canoe stays still. We are always here, he says, tapping the deck. The world moves past us. It's a mind-bending thought, imagining yourself fixed while the islands slide by like scenery on a theater stage. You test it in your head, picturing invisible land masses drifting by, marking your progress though nothing physical changes. It feels like trying to walk on a treadmill that spans an entire ocean. A quirky tidbit Tupa shares, grinning: some navigators described these mental charts in terms of people instead of places. An island might be the old fisherman's house or the fat boar's resting place, and you'd sail as though those personalities were gliding past. It makes wayfinding sound less like navigation and more like attending a floating family reunion, which, you admit, would at least be entertaining. Historians still argue whether this conceptual moving island technique originated as a mnemonic trick for teaching novices, or whether it reflects a deeper Polynesian worldview about humans and nature being in constant relationship. Some anthropologists believe this mental map shows a non-Western concept of space itself, not linear, not gridded, but relational and fluid. You feel your brain start to cramp just thinking about it. Tupa insists you try it. He names 3 islands you've never heard of, pointing vaguely toward empty horizons. You're supposed to imagine them sliding by on your right, then another on your left. At first, your mind rebels. There's just water out there, nothing to pin your thoughts to. But gradually, as he talks you through the sequence, you picture phantom silhouettes gliding by. When he asks where you are, you stammer the wrong answer. The crew laughs again, the same easy amusement as before, like parents watching a toddler try to walk. "Don't worry," Tupa says. "Took me 10 years. That's becoming a theme on this journey." The brilliance of the ATAC system hits you slowly. It lets navigators plot a course without a physical chart or compass, tracking progress in a way that doesn't rely on seeing land at all. The voyage exists first in the mind, then in the canoe's movement. When cloud patterns, birds, or swells give hints of a certain island's presence, even hundreds of miles off, you place it in your mental lineup and shift your fixed position accordingly. You're like a spider in the middle of a moving web, sensing every tug. You try to imagine your own modern brain operating like this. Instead of typing an address into a GPS, you'd picture your entire route as if buildings and streets floated toward you, one after another, while you stood still. Somehow it feels almost dreamlike, yet Tupa treats it like second nature. As the sun climbs high and the canoe keeps slicing through water, you start to sense how much mental energy goes into every voyage. There's no drifting off into daydreams for a wayfinder. The mind is always alive, tracking the invisible dance of islands and stars, reading signs most people would never notice. Yet, paradoxically, it feels calm, almost meditative. You close your eyes and imagine invisible islands sliding past, whispering their names to yourself, as if repeating a lullaby only ancient sailors know. The ocean becomes less of a void and more of a shifting map you might someday learn to read. Maybe 10 years from now you'd even get the answer right. The night sky spreads above you like a velvet blanket stitched with 1 billion silver pinpricks. The air is cooler now, salted and damp, a soft breath moving across your skin as the canoe cuts smoothly through dark water. You're jolted awake when one of the crew gently nudges you and points upward. "Your turn to learn the story," he says, his grin illuminated by starlight. Fact: Polynesian navigation is built on the star compass, a mental chart of the entire horizon divided into houses, each occupied by specific stars rising and setting at predictable points. This isn't about memorizing a few bright dots like the Big Dipper. It's an intricate map of dozens of stars, each a reliable guidepost if you know its timing and trajectory. Tupa kneels beside you and sweeps a finger across the horizon, naming stars in a calm, low chant. "Tekape," he murmurs, then "Hoku'ula," then "Rehua," each word falling like a pebble into a still pond. You try to follow, but the stars blur together, endless pinpricks of light. You're amazed anyone can pick out one from another without a telescope or planetarium laser pointer. Quirky tidbit: some navigators compared the horizon to a giant house. Stars don't just rise and set, they sleep in certain directions, wake up in others. If you treat the horizon like a village, you know who lives where and which neighbor you can count on to guide your way. There's a wry joke among wayfinders that losing your heading is like forgetting which cousin lives next door, embarrassing and unforgivable. Historians still argue whether Polynesian star maps were standardized across islands or entirely personal, passed down within families like secret recipes. Some traditions match across vast distances, others vary wildly, as though every navigator builds their own relationship with the heavens. Modern researchers try to reconstruct these systems, but even with technology, they struggle to hold all that knowledge in their heads the way Tupa does. You're invited to try, of course. Tupa points out a bright star low in the east. That's Aldebaran, he says, though he gives its Polynesian name. Follow it, we go home. Easy enough. But then he sweeps to another star only a thumb's width away. That one, we end up 300 miles south. You gape at the difference a single star makes, imagining how easy it would be to confuse one for another. You decide you're not ready to captain this canoe just yet. As the night deepens, the canoe feels less like a boat and more like a floating observatory. The sail flaps softly overhead, ropes creak, and every face tilts upward, trusting ancient light to keep them on course. Tupa explains that stars act as stepping stones, a way to walk across the ocean. You memorize one rising, steer by it until another takes its place, like trading handholds on a climbing wall. The sheer mental skill boggles you. While your modern brain relies on glowing screens and GPS voices to tell you where to go, these sailors carried the entire sky in their memories. Their map isn't printed. It's sung, whispered, and taught under starlit nights just like this one. You try repeating some of the star names softly to yourself. It feels like casting a spell you barely understand. Somewhere between the fourth and fifth repetition, your eyelids grow heavy. The stars blur, but not unpleasantly. They become streaks, gentle reminders that someone here knows exactly where you are, even in the middle of infinite darkness. The canoe rocks you gently like a cradle, the universe your ceiling, and you drift toward sleep, marveling at the thought that people once sailed thousands of miles across open water using only memory and starlight. You're not sure you'll remember all the names by morning, but you know you'll remember the feeling, the quiet, confident trust that the night sky itself can lead you safely home. Morning light spills over the ocean like warm syrup, slow and sticky, tinting everything gold. You wake to the sound of laughter. The crew is joking about last night's lesson, making good-natured bets on whether you could even find the North Star now. You groan, rubbing your face, which only makes them laugh harder. You're learning, yes, but at a snail's pace. They reassure you it took them years. You don't believe them for a second. Tupa waves you over to where the canoe's sail is half lowered. Today, he says, we talk about the sky you can't see. You blink. The sky you can't see? He means clouds. Not just their shapes, but their secrets. Fact: Polynesian navigators could read clouds as signposts of land. Over islands, especially ones with lush vegetation, clouds form differently than they do over open water. The heat rising from trees and soil feeds tall, puffy cumulus towers, while thin, flat streaks often mark dry atolls. From dozens of miles away, navigators could guess what type of island lay ahead just by its sky hat. You tilt your head back, studying the fluffy cotton lumps above. To you, they all look like, well, clouds. Nothing special. But Tupa points out one on the far horizon, its base darker, its edges towering high. Island, he says. Big, water, trees. Then he points to another with a low, pale base, thin as a sheet. Dry, maybe no water, he mutters, as if chatting with the weather itself. Quirky tidbit. There's an old navigator's joke that clouds are gossipers. He says they tell everyone what the island below is wearing. Some dress in green, some dress in sand. The clouds tell the truth, if you ask politely. The thought of clouds as snitches makes you chuckle, though you wonder how many times someone must have sailed toward a promising cloud only to find disappointment. Historians still argue how reliable this method really was. Some claim seasoned voyagers could guess not only that land existed, but whether it had fresh water, tall trees, or a volcanic peak, all from a faint wisp on the horizon. Skeptics say confirmation bias played a part. See enough clouds, eventually one will lead to an island. Still, countless oral histories describe this skill working in practice, which makes you think there's more truth than luck here. You spend the afternoon playing cloud detective, shading your eyes and pointing out shapes, guessing what lies below. Most of your guesses earn gentle head shakes and grins. One, though, gets a rare nod of approval. You puff up with pride until a crew member mutters "beginner's luck," and the boat erupts in laughter. As the sun dips toward the horizon, you realize something bigger is happening. Every lesson, stars, birds, swells, even clouds, works together. No single sign guarantees success, but weave them all, layer them like threads, and a picture forms, a map not written down, but felt. The sky stops being just sky, it becomes a partner in your journey, whispering hints you're just beginning to understand. That night, as clouds glow faintly in moonlight, you lie back on the deck and watch their slow ballet across the stars. For the first time, you think you can almost hear them gossiping about some hidden island far ahead, waiting patiently to be found. The thought makes you smile as you drift to sleep, rocked by waves and lulled by wind. The sky overhead no longer empty, but full of quiet secrets you might one day learn to read. The next morning, the ocean feels different. Not rougher or calmer, just off. You squint at the horizon, but everything looks normal. The canoe sways gently, sails full, waves small. Still, Tupa has a strange intensity in his eyes, a kind of alertness that makes you straighten up and try to feel whatever he feels. Fact: Polynesian navigators could read invisible ocean swells, long rolling movements of water that travel thousands of miles from distant storms, to know which direction land lay, even if no island or bird was in sight. These swells are subtle, sometimes just a barely perceptible tilt of the canoe's hull, but in skilled hands they're a reliable compass. Tupa makes you close your eyes. He says, "Forget what you see. The eyes lie. The belly knows." You frown, confused, until he makes you sit cross-legged, hands on the hull. "Feel," he repeats. You let your body loosen, giving in to the canoe's movements. At first, it's all chaos, up, down, side to side. But after a few long breaths, you begin to sense a rhythm beneath the randomness, a slow, steady rise and fall from one side, like a gentle hand rocking you. Tupa whispers, "That swell came from the east. It leads to an island." Quirky tidbit: there are stories of navigators who could sense these swells even in pitch-black storms, their internal compasses so fine-tuned they swore they could see the island beneath their feet days before reaching it. One old tale tells of a man who trained by lying blindfolded on a beach for hours, memorizing every motion of waves rolling toward shore until he could feel even the ghost of that movement far out at sea. The crew laughs about it, but doesn't deny it's possible with enough practice. Historians still argue whether this is raw instinct or something more like advanced physics knowledge passed orally. Some researchers call it wave piloting, noting that different swells from different directions create interference patterns on the ocean surface, a kind of watery fingerprint unique to areas near land or reefs. To navigators, these patterns were not abstract, they were a living map under their feet. Tupa has you try steering the canoe for a bit. Follow the belly, he says, meaning to align with that eastward swell. You'd grip the paddle awkwardly, overcorrect, and nearly send the boat spinning sideways. The crew howls with laughter, one man slapping his knee, while Tupa kindly rescues the steering before you do real damage. Maybe one day, he says, trying not to grin too widely. You make a mental note never to accept a job as a Polynesian helmsman anytime soon. Still, the experience changes something in you. You begin to notice how each swell feels different, some longer, gentler, others short and choppy. It's like learning to hear accents in a language you never knew existed. The canoe is no longer just on the ocean, it's in a conversation with it. The hull tapping out a dialogue you can almost understand. Later, under the hot midday sun, you watch Tupa trace imaginary lines in the air. This swell, he says, comes from a storm hundreds of miles that way. Another line in the opposite direction, this one from trade winds. Where they meet and cross, a navigable path emerges, invisible to anyone who isn't paying attention. You marvel at how the whole ocean becomes a chart without ink or compass, guided entirely by sensation. As evening falls, you lie flat on your back in the canoe, eyes closed, letting the swells roll under you like a giant, slow heartbeat. It feels oddly comforting, a reminder that even here in endless water, the land is shaping the sea, reaching out in ripples you can learn to trust. You fall asleep rocking gently, dreaming of invisible hands guiding your path home. The dawn breaks soft and hazy, the kind of morning where everything feels muffled, like the world is wrapped in cotton. You stretch, yawning, only to find the crew already wide awake, leaning over the side of the canoe. At first you think something's wrong, maybe a leak or a fish stuck in the nets. But then you realize they're staring into the water like it's a book they're reading. Fact: Polynesian navigators read subtle changes in ocean color and patterns of floating debris to locate land long before it appeared on the horizon. The ocean isn't just one shade of blue. It shifts with depth, with the presence of coral reefs, or with river sediment carried out to sea. Trained eyes can tell whether that patch of water means open ocean, a nearby lagoon, or an island with fresh water flowing into it. Tupa gestures for you to crouch beside him. "Look there," he says, pointing to a faint greenish smear on otherwise dark blue water. You squint, baffled. To you it looks like, well, water. Wet, shiny, ordinary water. Tupa sighs good-naturedly and explains. Shallow seabeds reflect sunlight differently, casting a turquoise glow that gives away reefs or sandbars far from visible land. Inexperienced sailors often miss this, running their boats aground or sailing past safe harbors without knowing. Quirky tidbit: ancient stories tell of navigators who could tell the species of tree growing on an unseen island by the types of leaves or seeds drifting in the water. Imagine spotting a floating seed and thinking, "Ah yes, a pandanus tree, must be an atoll nearby." It sounds like wizardry, yet generations swore by it, and modern tests have confirmed that debris patterns do change by island. Historians still argue whether such skills were universal among voyagers or limited to rare masters, Some claim every Polynesian child could read water like a highway sign. Others believe it was a guarded talent, taught only to chosen apprentices. Either way, it added another invisible layer to the ocean map, one that blended sight, experience, and faith in patterns nature whispered. Tupa hands you a small net and tells you to scoop up whatever floats by. Soon you collect tiny bits of seaweed, a feather, a seed pod. He examines them like a detective poring over clues. This, he says, holding up the seed, comes from a tree that grows only on high islands. The feather? A seabird you didn't even notice circling miles away. Land not far, he declares, and the crew nods as if the ocean just mailed them an invitation to dinner. The sun climbs higher, and suddenly you start noticing shifts in watercolor you swear weren't there before. Maybe your eyes are adjusting, or maybe you're just learning to pay attention. The greenish patches, the swirls of sediment, the way waves ripple differently near unseen reefs, they form a secret alphabet beneath your canoe. You feel like you've been illiterate your whole life and someone just handed you your first primer. There's humor in it, too. At one point, you mistake the reflection of the sail for a new water clue, pointing with excitement. The crew erupts in laughter, teasing you mercilessly. "Navigator of shadows," one calls, shaking his head. You can't help laughing along, even as you promise yourself you'll do better next time. By late afternoon, the island that was hinted at all morning finally emerges on the horizon, a smudge of green confirming everything Tupa read hours before. It's humbling to realize you could have been adrift, blind to the signs, while others had been seeing land all along. That night, as the canoe rests in a calm patch of water, you think about how navigation here isn't just direction, it's relationship. The ocean isn't an empty road, but a living book full of hints and signals, if you know how to read them. You close your eyes, the canoe swaying gently, wondering what other secrets these waters still hold, just beneath the surface. The morning sun is sharp today, bouncing off the water in dazzling flashes that make you squint and wish for sunglasses. The canoe glides steadily forward, but something feels anticipatory. The crew is unusually quiet, their movements deliberate, eyes scanning both sea and sky. You finally ask Tupa why everyone looks like they're waiting for a big announcement. He grins. "Because today," he says, "we listen for the island before we see it." Fact: Polynesian navigators often used sound to locate land. Long before sight confirmed it, they could hear the low, rhythmic roar of waves breaking against unseen reefs or cliffs, even miles away over the water. To an untrained ear, the ocean is one endless shush of waves, but to skilled voyagers, each sound had its own meaning, a signature echo of a particular shore. Tupa crouches and tells you to close your eyes, let the wind brush past your ears, and really listen. At first, you hear only the soft slap of water against the canoe, the creak of ropes, the hiss of waves. But then, faintly, there's a deeper, booming note under it all, like someone tapping a distant drum. Tupa nods. "That's the reef. We're close." Quirky tidbit. Some navigators claimed they could distinguish islands not just by sight or smell, but by the song of the waves. Each reef shape, each coastline curve created a unique rhythm of breaking surf. Old voyagers liked to boast that they could name an island from its sound alone, like recognizing a friend's laugh in a crowded room. Whether this is exaggeration or true skill, no one can say for sure, but it's a charming thought as you strain to hear those oceanic whispers. Historians still argue how much of this auditory navigation was deliberate skill versus subconscious habit. Some anthropologists think sailors tuned into patterns without realizing it, their brains processing rhythms faster than conscious thought. Others believe it was as deliberate and practiced as reading stars, passed down in songs and chants meant to train ears as well as eyes. You try to follow Tupa's example, leaning low over the water, but you mostly hear the occasional splash of fish and the distant squawk of a seabird. When you point excitedly toward what you think might be the sound of land, the crew just chuckles, shaking their heads. Tupa pats your shoulder kindly, saying, "You're still learning to listen, not just hear." It's humbling, but strangely hopeful. You didn't even know there was a difference until now. Later in the day, you begin to notice more. How the wind shifts subtly as you approach land, carrying scents of flowers or damp soil. How birds call louder and circle more persistently. How the entire rhythm of ocean noise changes as the canoe draws near to hidden shores. You realize that navigation here isn't only about grand gestures like stars and swells, but about leaning into the smallest hints the world gives you. By evening, you're convinced you've caught that reef sound again, faint but steady, like nature softly clapping in welcome. When the island finally rises from the sea at sunset, a silhouette fringed with palms, you feel oddly proud, as if you helped find it, even though everyone else knew where it was all along. The crew teases you gently, saying, "Soon you'll navigate by smell next," and you laugh, thinking they're joking, but a tiny part of you wonders if they're not. Because if the ocean can be read by stars, clouds, swells, color, and sound, what other senses are waiting to be awakened? You fall asleep that night under a canopy of stars, lulled by the familiar hush of water, listening closely in case the ocean has one more secret to whisper before dawn. By now, days at sea have blurred together. The canoe feels like home, the creak of its ropes like lullabies, and the scent of salt clings to your hair no matter how often you rinse it in passing waves. You've learned to squint at stars, to watch clouds gossip above islands, to feel the belly of the sea roll beneath the hull. But today, Tupa announces something new, something you weren't expecting. Fact: traditional Polynesian navigation is not just physical, it's deeply tied to story, song, and memory. Routes weren't written on parchment, but encoded in chants and myths, woven into epics that could last hours. These songs acted as living maps, telling not only the directions, but also the mood of the voyage, the dangers to expect, and the histories of islands long visited or long lost. Tupa sits cross-legged, the crew gathering around. He begins a chant in a low, steady rhythm, a sound that rolls like the sea itself. The words are strange to your ears, yet the melody feels like a path your body could walk. He pauses, looks at you, and explains. Each verse tells where to go. This star, that swell, this bird, but also who went before, who loved here, who died here. Navigation, you realize, isn't just about finding places, it's about remembering them, honoring the journey of those who sailed before you. Quirky tidbit. Some voyagers believed a chant sung wrongly could literally change the course of a journey. A missing word might confuse the sea, make the stars sulk, or anger an ancestor spirit who once made the trip. So apprentices learned not just words, but tone, breath, and heartbeat, like memorizing a spell that kept the canoe safe. Historians still argue whether these chants were purely mnemonic devices, memory aids like rhyming road maps, or whether navigators truly believed the songs had power over the voyage itself. Perhaps both were true, or perhaps the line between fact and faith simply didn't matter when you're a speck of wood on an infinite ocean. Tupa teaches you a fragment of a route chant, slow and patient. The words trip clumsily over your tongue, earning chuckles from the crew. You're not offended. The melody is hypnotic, almost meditative, as if the ocean listens along with you. And for a moment, you feel the canoe's path settle into the rhythm of your voice, like you're part of the steering, guiding through song. Later, lying under the stars, you hum that fragment quietly to yourself. Whether it truly helps you navigate or not, you can't deny it anchors you. A mental map you can carry even with eyes closed. It feels like another kind of magic, one that doesn't fight the ocean, but flows with it. There's humor in it, too. At one point, you mistake the reflection of the sail for a new water clue, pointing with excitement. The crew erupts in laughter, teasing you mercilessly. "Navigator of shadows," one calls, shaking his head. You can't help laughing along, even as you promise yourself you'll do better next time. By late afternoon, the island that was hinted at all morning finally emerges on the horizon, a smudge of green confirming everything Tupa read hours before. It's humbling to realize you could have been adrift, blind to the signs, while others had been seeing land all along. That night, as the canoe rests in a calm patch of water, you think about how navigation here isn't just direction, it's relationship. The ocean isn't an empty road, but a living book full of hints and signals, if you know how to read them. You close your eyes, the canoe swaying gently, wondering what other secrets these waters still hold, just beneath the surface. The sun lifts slowly today, a molten coin spilling warmth over the horizon. You're used to the endless water now, the salt-dried skin, the rhythm of the canoe. But Tupa tells you that today you'll learn the hardest part of navigation, the part that can't be taught in one lesson, maybe not even in a lifetime. Trusting yourself when the ocean feels empty. Fact. Voyagers often spent weeks or months on long journeys between distant island chains, sometimes losing sight of land for so long that doubt gnawed in even the most seasoned sailors. There were no modern compasses, no maps, no GPS, only memory, the night sky, and a gut feeling honed by years of observation. A single wrong heading could mean missing a speck of land by miles and never finding it again. You try to imagine it. Days and nights with no sign of anything except water, stars, and birds that don't always keep promises. The thought makes your stomach knot. You probably wouldn't survive this, you mutter half-jokingly, echoing your own words from the very first night on this journey. The crew laughs knowingly, but not unkindly. They've seen apprentices wrestle with that fear before. Quirky tidbit. Some navigators brought small heirlooms, a carved shell, a feather, or a stone, said to contain the spirit of a guiding ancestor. They believed the object would nudge them toward home, or hold the canoe on the right path when their minds wavered. Whether it was superstition or comfort, it gave courage on empty horizons. Tupa shows you his own, a smooth, time-worn pebble he keeps tucked under the lashings near the steering paddle. "This is my grandfather," he says with a smile, "and he never gets lost." Historians still argue how much long-distance voyages depended on skill versus sheer luck. Some modern sailors suggest these journeys were miraculous flukes, islands stumbled upon by accident. But oral traditions describe round trips, intentional colonizations, and systematic exploration centuries before Europeans arrived, implying skill levels far beyond guessing and hoping. It's a debate unlikely to end soon, though the existence of vast Polynesian networks of islands seems to answer part of it. The day drags on under relentless sun. No birds, no change in water color, no clouds hinting at land. It feels like you're adrift in eternity. Tupa sits near you, sensing your unease. Tupa, navigation is not only tools, it is patience. It is believing the island is there, even when you cannot see it. You take his advice, closing your eyes, breathing with the swell. Slowly, you feel the rhythm you learned days ago, the eastward tug under the canoe, the faint warmth of a certain wind on your cheek. You recall fragments of the chant from yesterday, the taste of salt in the breeze, the gossiping clouds you've started to recognize. Each sign is small, but stacked together, they point in a direction that feels right. Maybe you're not entirely blind out here. As the day fades to a bruised purple twilight, someone spots a single seabird darting low over the waves, flying determinedly west. A cheer rises from the crew, and relief floods you. You realize you've just lived through the hardest lesson, holding a course when doubt screams louder than waves, trusting knowledge passed hand to hand, voice to voice, long before you were born. That night, the stars burn brighter than ever. You whisper a thank you to the ocean, to the ancestors, to every unseen force that threads these roots together. It's not just skill, not just luck. It feels like something larger, a bond between people and sea, built on generations of listening, remembering, and daring to believe in islands that haven't yet appeared. The canoe glides softly through the water, the sail lazily puffing as dawn spills gold across the sky. It feels like a day for endings, or maybe beginnings. You're not quite sure. Tupa gathers the crew close as you approach what will be the last leg of this long voyage. You've been learning piece by piece, like collecting shells along the beach, and now he promises to show you how it all comes together. Fact: true Polynesian navigation blended every sense, every clue into one seamless awareness of the ocean world. Stars, swells, birds, clouds, colors, smells, sounds, and memories of chance all merged, not as separate skills, but as one living map carried in the navigator's mind. It wasn't about following a single sign, it was about holding the entire ocean in your head and trusting it to guide you home. The day starts quietly, the crew barely speaking as you travel. You watch the sky, noting faint streaks of high clouds pointing toward a weather shift. You remember Tupa's teachings. Islands make their own weather, pulling clouds over them like hats. You trace swells with your fingertips, feel the canoe sway to their pull. A lone tern skims past, flying steadily toward the horizon, and you catch yourself grinning. This time, you didn't need anyone to tell you what that means. Quirky tidbit: some navigators described their skills as seeing with the belly, or smelling islands with the skin. You used to think these were poetic exaggerations, but now you almost understand. The canoe has become an extension of your body, every shift in balance a message from the sea. Even the air feels textured, changing subtly as you draw closer to unseen land, carrying hints of warm soil and leaves. Historians still argue whether these sensory impressions are learned science or instinct passed down through generations of sailors. Anthropologists debate whether the human brain adapts in extraordinary ways at sea, creating a kind of sixth sense. Whatever the truth, it feels like a superpower, one earned through humility, patience, and endless practice rather than magic. By late afternoon, the crew points ahead where a faint smudge appears on the horizon. But before you focus on it, Tupa makes you close your eyes. He says, "Find it without sight." You breathe in slowly. The air smells earthier, tinged with distant greenery. The swells feel slightly bent, rolling from directions that suggest a large obstacle shaping them. You hear, faint but steady, the heartbeat thrum of surf breaking on a reef, and you know. You could point to that island without ever opening your eyes. When you finally look, the island is waiting there, a promise kept by sea and stars and every teacher you've had along the way. The crew cheers softly, not the wild celebration of first discovery, but the warm contentment of returning to a place long known. You feel a swell of gratitude to Tupa, to the ancestors whose songs paved these paths, and even to the ocean itself, generous and terrifying and endlessly wise. That night, anchored in a calm lagoon, you lie on your back under constellations that have become old friends. You think of the endless routes crisscrossing this ocean, invisible highways stitched together by memory, trust, and courage. It feels like holding a vast shimmering secret in your hands, the kind of secret that can only be shared through story and experience, never written down on paper. Your eyes grow heavy, the canoe rocks gently, the water whispering against its sides, stars humming their old tunes above you, and you know in this moment that you'll never look at the ocean the same way again. The voyage is over now. The sails have been lowered, the fire on the beach crackles softly, and the night has wrapped itself around you like a blanket. You feel every muscle unspool, the tension of days at sea drifting away with the tide. Above, the stars glow faintly, not bright pinpricks anymore, but soft lanterns swaying in the dark, keeping you company as you drift toward sleep. The ocean, restless and endless before, feels gentle now, breathing in long, slow sighs against the shore. You can almost hear it murmur approval, like a teacher proud of your first halting steps into its language. The air smells of warm sand and distant flowers, the kind of scent that makes your chest loosen and your thoughts go hazy around the edges. You let your mind replay the journey, not in detail, just in feelings. The salt on your lips, the hum of a chant on the wind, the warmth of sun on your skin, the rocking cradle of a canoe trusting invisible paths. Each memory unwinds slowly, like knots coming loose, until all that's left is quiet. You're safe here. The waves keep a steady rhythm, a lullaby, too old to forget. The stars promise that even the vastest ocean has a way home, if you know how to listen. So you breathe deeper, longer, letting the world shrink to this one calm moment. The journey's over. You don't need to steer anymore. The island holds you, the sea rocks you, and sleep waits just beyond the next soft tide. Good night, traveler. Rest well. The ocean will still be here, singing its secret songs when you wake. End of script. Sweet dreams.